All right, welcome to the S3 study group. Today we're going to cover the meta pattern called the Common Sense Framework. Let me share my screen here to bring that up. All right. Okay, so is this coming through when I share like this?
Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
it.
it's coming through. Okay, awesome. So S3 realized that they have a lot of patterns, and it was kind of hard to know where to start when you're bringing S3 into an organization. So they created something called the Common Sense Framework to help people kind of navigate what it's about and what patterns you might want to consider bringing in. Other systems like Holacracy have a giant constitution that you accept, and it's a giant framework. It's like almost an all or nothing. But Sociocracy really allows you to gradually introduce things by bringing in different patterns over time. Um, so what they really did was kind of create a nested set of patterns. You'll see at the very center, there's stuff around clarifying purpose and developing strategy. And then around that, you have these principles around focus on value, sense and respond, run experiments. And then around that, you have enable autonomy, collaborate on dependencies. And then the outermost layer, you have invest in learning, intentionally develop culture, and build shared mental models. So they go through different ways of doing this, and these are the 10 principles of the common sense framework. And this is still part of S3, it's just a different kind of context layer to organize things in a different way that kind of is a little more intentional, and you can focus on different things. So if you really need to clarify purpose, it'll kind of look at that. If you want to develop strategy, focus on value, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to walk through those. So they have two principles for what they call orientation, and this is at the very center of the common sense framework. And that's really principle one is clarify purpose, ensure that everyone understands who the organization or team is serving, why and to what end, so everyone is able to focus and unite their efforts on achieving that purpose. And then principle two is develop strategy. Develop a strategy to guide value creation so that everyone shares a common direction and strategy is adapted as necessary to achieve the purpose. So those are often like two really good principles to start with if you're bringing S3 in. And some of the patterns that help you achieve this for clarified purpose is to describe organizational drivers and determine requirements. So there's patterns for those. And for principle two, develop strategy, they have a big list of stuff around clarify and develop domains, clarify intended outcomes, describe organizational drivers, clarify and develop strategy, evaluate and evolve agreements, and evaluation criteria. So these may all be really great places to lean into if you're really thinking of starting with S3 and want to kind of start at the core of things. The next circle around here are 3 principles for navigation. So this is really to help people and teams navigate the space. So principle 3 is focus on value. You focus on your daily work you focus your daily work on value delivery. So that's stuff that needs doing to achieve your purposes done. Principle 4 is sense and respond. Identify, prioritize, and respond to impediments and opportunities so that you can adapt or pivot as necessary and improve where you can. And then principle 5 is to run experiments. Run experiments to address complex challenges so that you can learn how to move closer to where you want to be. And that's really just acknowledging sometimes we don't know the right answer, so we should run experiments and kind of test hypotheses and see how they work out. So there's a whole set of patterns that help you to do those things. For the focus on value, again, clarifying develop domains is in a lot of these patterns, so that's kind of a core thing. Responding to organizational drivers, prioritizing backlogs, limit work in progress, daily stand-ups, test arguments qualify as objections. So that gets kind of into the consent process. Principle 4 for the sense and respond, there's a whole set of essential patterns, continuous improvement of work processes, describe organizational drivers, different requirements, governance backlog, navigate via attention, and respond to organizational drivers. And all of these patterns are ones that we'll eventually cover, and some of these we've already done through the study group. So we should have some videos if you want to dive deeper into some of these that we've already gone through. And then principle 5 is running experiments. So these are describe organizational drivers, determine requirements, clarify intended outcome, evaluation criteria. This is where we have consent decision making for the first time, evaluate and involve agreements, limit work in progress, and create a pull system for organizational change. And then outside of that are kind of 2 principles for structure. And this is really to help structure things in the organization. Principle 6 is enable autonomy. So you want to free individuals and teams to create values as autonomously as possible so that you can deliver value fast and avoid unnecessary dependencies. And principle 7 is collaborate on dependencies. So co-create and evolve a coherent system to deal with all dependencies so that you deliver fast when dependencies can't be avoided. So sometimes you can't have 100% full autonomy. There are times when you have to talk to somebody and work together. So these kind of 2 principles balance each other out. So for the autonomy side, yeah.
Hey, Nori, do you mind?
Yep.
Could you rewind 2 slides? Because when you were showing this slide, I started to realize, yeah, it was right about here. It was in this second ring. We were only in this second ring of the common sense framework, and I was already feeling overwhelmed by the number of patterns that we're seeing in principle 3, 4, and 5. And what I wanted to just quickly comment on is that amongst those like 12 different patterns in this second ring, you don't have to pick them all at once, and you don't have to wait to pick them all up before going out to ring 3 and getting something valuable from there. So I really appreciate that there's so much richness here, but I want to address the sense of tension that people think, oh, you've got to grab all of that before you can even get mature enough to go to the outer realms of
yeah, absolutely. And S3 is really a set of patterns that you grab as you need. There's one thing that's kind of called navigate by tension, and that's really kind of a great way to do it, is to say, hey, this isn't going so well here. Maybe there's a principle to help us, and then you can look. And the whole common sense framework is really to help you identify what patterns those might be, because you can say, oh, this is really in the area of focusing on value. What are the things we can look at? And then you can say, oh, maybe we start to need to do a daily stand-up, and you can introduce that. But you don't need to, yeah, you're right. You don't need to do all of these before you move to another principle or to another ring. You can use and adapt, and you may only pick one or a handful from any of these areas as you mature. And each organization is going to be different. Each situation is going to be different. So, but there are a few core patterns, I think, that would be really interesting to see which ones people are using all the time when they start to use S3 in different contexts.
And
yeah.
while we've paused, I've got is it meant to sort of start in the center and then work its way out, starting with what was it, defining purpose and clarifying purpose and strategy, and then sort of work your way out? Because these categories are pretty cool, and they don't necessarily match up with the other categories for the patterns, for instance, in the map. It seems like these might be like functionally categorized as opposed to sort of the other way of categorizing it. So I love the run experiments, because I don't know if it's something that we've talked quite a bit about here in Odin, but I don't know. Is it a pattern in S3 specifically? I don't know, but yeah, this seems cool, and I was just curious if that's how it works. You start at the beginning, or start at the center, and then work your way out.
I'm guessing that was the way it was intended, just since it's like principle one is clarify purpose, and then it goes down. To
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So that ordering itself, it's not stated anywhere that I saw that you start at the center and work your way up. Because I can see you could do it the other way around if you wanted to build culture first and the shared mental model.
There's a lot that's really foundational in those first two categories, and one of them actually mentions you can do the rest of your stuff more effectively. Strategy area. Once you've done the strategy area, you can do the rest more effectively.
Yeah. Where were we? And then this ring,
Yeah.
kind of around enabling autonomy and collaborating on dependencies, are some of the meatier ones, because this is where you have your pull system for work and you start to define your roles and your circles and clarifying and developing strategy, development plans. So you're starting to work on development of the team, aligning flow. And I like this because it really focuses on how do we get to autonomy, and it's really through being very clear on who's doing what and having carefully defined roles and circles and things like that. And then the collaborate on dependencies there will always be places where you need to collaborate. So in those areas, there's a set of patterns to make sure that there are ways that you're able to work as quickly as possible, even though you need to collaborate. So those are things like linkings or delegate circles, visualizing work, clarifying and develop domains, navigating by tension. Navigating by tension is one of my favorites because it's kind of one of those fundamental patterns where you kind of start simple, and then as you hit tensions, you know that there's this pattern here so that you can actually go, okay, this is a tension, how do we resolve it? And you kind of move. And then the tension itself is not a negative, it's a navigation tool. So it's not to be avoided, it's to be really sensed and figure out, because you consciously started without a really concrete plan, either because the space is complex or chaotic or whatever it is, but it's a great tool. Nicodemus, your hand is up.
Yeah, what you're saying about this negative via tension pattern here really resonates with me as a writer. If I can just share my experience real quick. When you're a writer and you're really into your craft and you look to do it with other people, you have to open yourself up to feedback from your peers, and you have to open yourself to the review process and to the drafting process and all that. Now, that can be very damaging, but it also serves to help you identify your points of weakness, like those points of tension where you're not quite sure in your work. Well, maybe it's because there's a reason for that. And having the opportunity to use that to help you understand how to become better, right? So that it doesn't necessarily destroy your confidence, but rather helps you embrace what you could be doing, the level of work you could be putting out. Like, that's just, I never knew what to call that. But now that I'm listening to y'all here, it's like navigating the attention. I love it. It's phenomenal. It's great. It brings a lot of clarity to my experience. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about these patterns is they kind of encompass these little best practices or patterns of how to do things, and they give it a name so that we have a shared culture and we can talk about navigate the attention. And if anybody understands what that is, then it helps us have a shortcut to get to that space where we all understand that's what we're doing.
The shared mental model.
Yes, which is coming up next. So, and then the outermost ring are the 3 principles for transformation, which are invest in learning, intentionally develop culture, and building shared mental models. And again, they have a whole series of different patterns here. I think I used the wrong image on the circle. That should be the outermost.
Oh,
but
yeah.
these are invest in learning, so navigating by tension, evaluating meetings, peer review, development plans, peer feedback. So these are all the things that Nicodemus was just talking about too, is how do you get feedback from your peers and grow from that. And Jeremy went through a whole series of these kind of S3 pattern reviews around that whole, there's 4 patterns in there around ask for help, peer review, development plan, peer feedback. So those are really great tools to invest in learning. Intentionally developing culture around artful participation, adopting the 7 principles, agreeing on values, how to evaluate involved agreements, etc. And then the last one is building shared mental models. And again, navigate via attention is here. That's a great way to really look at how to grow, determining requirements, clarifying and develop domains, and clarify intended outcomes. So that's the common sense framework. Is it takes the patterns within S3, and there's a huge map that we usually use in S3 that breaks down the patterns into different kind of areas, but this is kind of a different lens on it that kind of nets them in kind of a nested hierarchy of kind of clarity and values and different things like that. But it's kind of a cool way of just looking at the patterns and putting them in, so you can think about where you're at and what you want to do first and next, and navigate your way through the patterns here. But that's pretty much all I had. I just wanted to highlight what the common sense framework was, how it's laid out, and how it might be used. But, yeah, open to other comments and stuff now. Where if you have any questions or thoughts on the common sense framework, and if it might be helpful at all in the kinds of things that you're looking at.
I think Joe had her hand up. You probably didn't see that.
No.
But yeah, just wanted to give her the chance if she still wants to.
Sorry, I'm presenting
Thank you.
full screen, so I can't see anything.
That's all
Go
good,
ahead.
Nori.
All right.
My question was when you got to the tensions piece. So I'm interested to know the size of group that works with, or whether that was a kind of a one-on-one thing or a small group thing. Because in a big group there can be lots of tensions, and I know from recent experience in a particular committee, I dropped a question in, particularly about facilitation, actually, and oh my God, the barrage of different questions and tensions that showed up as the consequence of putting that short document on the table was, yeah, a lot. So yeah, I'm digging into that pattern specifically, but maybe it's another session.
Yeah, have we done a session on navigate by tension yet? I think it's one of my favorites, and it's kind of the gateway to kind of that curiosity space where, but I don't think it's meant to be like, here's 17 tensions, let's all talk about it. For me, it's really, if you have one tension, you can look at it and try to analyze it in a way so that you can come up and say, oh, this tension leads to this driver, and this driver can lead to this proposal on how to address it. And then you can use that to introduce new patterns or create agreements or fire up a circle or whatever it's going to be as a way of handling that driver. But tensions really kind of is that body sense where it's like, oh, this isn't smooth or working or clear enough for me. We need some way of dealing with this. And it can lead to a whole series of different actions. It can be a consent process. It can be other things, just talking about it. It can be whatever it is, but it's kind of just that opening to potential and possibility for me. Simon, your hand's up.
I feel like when you said that this tension was around facilitation, I feel like maybe the problem of facilitation was why you weren't able to address the tension, because if the tension isn't well facilitated, right, you don't come to a conclusion or to a result, right?
Indeed, it's a bit meta because the question was about facilitation, and the problem with actually getting to organizing the thoughts around facilitation was that there was no facilitation. So it was kind of a chicken and egg situation. So yeah, I mean, it's something to unpack at a later date, maybe.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, the, I can jump in on like that. I love the navigate by tension, pattern, and it may give you some insight. One of the cool things about it is that it separates, it kind of homogenizes, it sort of takes, you don't just show up with a tension, like a bad feeling, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a bad feeling, it's just a feeling, and it puts a very clear focus on the way you are experiencing, which is the only thing that, you know, we can speak with authority about. So it gets around like jumping to conclusions, or if I think when it's done correctly, there's not a lot of defensiveness. And your original question was like, does it work in small groups or in big groups? I think it works in groups that have the shared mental model. Like once you get to that, thinking of this framework here, the common sense framework, like once everyone understands that because somebody is raising attention, that is like a gift, because then you're like, oh, now we have a clear path to sort of navigate around. And then there's like steps. It's not like, you know, attention is just like a hand grenade thrown in the thing, which if you don't have a process for dealing with it, it can be, because of, you know, people take it the wrong way, or they get defensive, or even the person that's experiencing jumps into like all these, you know, narrative and storytelling to make it make sense. So just from being involved with this pattern, like it does change my mental model, and it helps me to sort of navigate, not to use that term, but to be in situations where I'm experiencing the tensions and the sort of the work, you know, without getting too stressed, to be in a weird way. Yeah.
Thanks, Noonan. That's really helpful. And just to give you a little bit more of about the story, one of those things you mentioned we actually did is what became really apparent is that there isn't a shared understanding of what that committee is actually about. It's a group of people that have all got a specific role to do, but what is the role of us coming together has never been articulated or established, or, you know, we just all hold a role, right?
Yeah.
So it's a decentralized thing. So why are we called a committee rather than a group of decentralized actors that hold keys, you know, that all make up their own decisions? But do we actually need to come together as a committee? What does that actually mean to be a committee? So we're kind of going through a process of working out whether it is just a symbolic thing that we're all of a similar type, right? Rather than actually a committee working on something together, which has been good. I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, and
kind of brings
all
you
of
back
this, yeah,
to the center, like clarifying purpose. Like that's super important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Newman, go ahead.
Well, no, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that clarifying purpose. And the other thing, and, you know, we talk about it as, it's a quote from the Mythbusters that I always bring up, that the difference between messing around and science is writing things down. So if you don't have, and we've got these in Sociocracy, they have these Canvas, ways to put things on paper and make them explicit, so that there is, like it falls into that pattern of like agree on, clarifying the purpose, developing the strategy. I really like the agree on values. It's just like, okay, what are our overarching values, so that it gives you the autonomy to sort of be able to move and act in your circle or in your sphere. I guess that has to do with those dependencies and your idea of like, is it a collection of people, and what are their relationships, and are they dependent on one another, and then that changes the dynamic.
Yeah. Randall, your hand's up. Also, Tevo, I saw your hand up too, if you had something you want to add after Randall.
And yeah, Newman, what you were saying about it really requiring a mental model, that's where I went when those questions that without some without enough people in the room being organized to like be able to hear all the stuff that's going on in that channel, or hear all the stuff that's going on in a discussion of people who don't have the mental model, and be able to draw out what they're getting at in the form that is suggested by the S3 tension and driver patterns. Without having enough of those people, you've got a real organizational snafu.
Yeah, which is why it's important for people to learn it, people to study it, and then put it into practice. Yeah, for sure. To
Yeah,
get experience with it.
And or have enough people who come with that background to just help like the other people just get out what they are trying to get out, and frame it up and represent it in a way for everybody to see, oh, this is the problem that people are feeling. This is the intended outcome that we wanted to achieve once we really explored through what that tension was. And that's kind of the glib version of expressing the domain driver. You get to the outcome.
Very good.
Tevo, you had your hand up earlier. Is there something you wanted to?
You know, maybe it just sounds like out of context, but
Yeah.
like the idea of like, yeah, like proposing, getting tensions for proposing, it's basically a means changing status quo, and then that's the tension there. Like something new is coming, and it's unclear if, like, I would feel like facilitation, especially is probably like a huge overhead. Like if that would have been introduced the first time I kind of was part of Catalyst, I would be kind of skeptical. What, we're gonna make a meeting summary of these 4 people who are in this call, having a book club? But now I would be, yes, of course, this is real stuff you learn by writing it down, and then you're like sharing it. It's like, makes now sense. But yeah, maybe like if it's something that is not shared before, then it's a bit of like, because I do, nowadays when I do a proposal with like a lot of facilitation proposals, the meeting time is only like 1 hour, but the pre-work and after work is like now 4 hours on average, if this is a fucking good call where everybody shares something or has presentation ready. And for example, the Intersect town hall took me 10 hours to just write what already people wrote, because they share in Word so much more links and stuff they know, but never in slides or knowledge base, or they share it. And then I have to go to Google Shares and Twitter, and then like, because Intersect is like ignoring, so I don't even give us any access, and I have to do reshares too.
Very cool. Any other thoughts or comments on the common sense framework? Starting to feel like maybe navigate by tension would be another next good pattern for somebody to take. Because I don't think we've covered that one yet.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm mindful of the time. So
Yeah, 5 minutes out. All right, so that was the common sense pattern. Thanks everybody. I'm going to stop the recording here, and then we can move to maybe a formal checkout.